Hello everyone, today I'm looking at Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. This originally came out around 2016 as a AA production. It was really interesting because these were a bunch of industry veterans from Ninja Theory, and they essentially said, oh, well, we'll just make our own game. And so they kind of made their own little kind of indie studio, but they had the funding and the talent of, like, you know, all these people. And so they made a really interesting product, which was kind of, you know, not, I mean, really double A, whereas in between these two kind of, you know, big industry and just someone in their basement. And so their whole concept with this game was that, oh, we're going to do this Celtic Warriors saga thing, kind of like God of War, where you fight these mythological deities and all this other stuff. But there's also going to be an added aspect of psychological, you know, kind of gameplay in it, and that Senua has, I guess, some kind of schizophrenia or psychosis is the technical scientific term for what she has. So she hears voices, she sees symbols. You know, you could stretch that to whatever you want, but they took a more artistic approach with it. So that actually plays into the gameplay. So the basic gameplay loop is you have combat with these Draugr kind of enemies, which is, you know, decently complex. You know, you can block, dodge, you know, do a light attack, a heavy attack. You can do a run and a running attack. You also later unlock the ability to click R1, and you have this really cool slow-mo mode. And that's kind of the basic combat. Then it's usually divided up into the other things where puzzles where Senua will have to go around the environment, look for different shapes and symbols in the environment, and once she sees 2 or 3 of them, she can unlock the door to the next area. And so there's a lot of really cool effects that are taking place in this game, a lot of really weird kind of, you know, psychological or psychedelic looking things. And so you have to line up things that are like, you know, trees or stones or other kind of symbols in the environment to actually make the symbol that you need to unlock the door. And I've always thought that was really cool, those little perspective puzzles. And then, of course, the last kind of third of the game are, you know, cutscenes and, you know, sort of just story bits and exposition. Most of the game, Senua is basically always alone. There's really no one else with her. There are certain flashbacks to other figures. And, oh yeah, you also find this one guy who gives you a bunch of, like, Norse mythology, kind of just lore dumping, very similar to the head guy in the God of War game, who is more sort of comic relief. And so the main story here is basically Senua is, in her back pocket, she has kind of the head of her lover, who is basically slain by the Vikings. And so in the Celtic lore, I guess, they believe that the soul resided in the head, and so she has to bring his head essentially to this place where she can perform this ceremony and essentially let his spirit go or return him to the other side of the other world. And so it's this really interesting, you know, aspect and combination of, you know, this is kind of like a classical, you know, like Celtic or you know, like a fighter kind of series game where you're just, you know, fighting a bunch of guys in like this mythological setting, but with the added aspect of the character having this mental illness, more or less. She kind of, you know, it acts more as like a shaman or a spirit warrior. And so it kind of feels like a lot of the time you're on some kind of weird spirit journey. And there's a lot of really cool symbology and symbolism and how the environment transforms and changes around Senua. And, you know, is this part of like the mythological nature of, you know, is this actually happening or is this in Senua's mind? And so this really cool combination of these two separate ideas as to what is reality, what is fake, what is in her mind, and you know, what's a metaphor. And so, of course, the whole game is a metaphor for, you know, grief, you could say, where essentially, you know, she's bringing his head to this, you know, place where she can basically relieve his soul, but really it's more like a, you know, it's one of those Silent Hill 2 kind of stories where, you know, you have grief over your loved one and it's about getting over their loss. What's really interesting, though, is that sometimes the head in the back of Senua's pocket will breathe as if he's still alive and in pain, and she has to, like, relieve that by doing certain actions and completing certain objectives. I don't know, something else about this game is I think her name Marika is the main kind of voice actor and motion capture actor for Senua. And so she does a really interesting job. And actually, all the interviews regarding her in the game are really interesting. How she describes how she got into the character and like how she adapts everything and so on. And it's interesting too in the developer doc how essentially how they do these sort of schizo voices that whisper in your ear. They have this special microphone that literally is like 2 ears on a stick, and it is supposed to basically track and perfectly record binaural video or audio rather. And that they'll have the different voice actresses kind of hovering around the two different sides of the microphone. And so, yeah, you will have basically voices in your head throughout most of the journey commenting on Senua as if they're separate characters, you know, viewing her progress, as well as other voices that are presumably her mother or her father, Dillian, who, you know, she's trying to save essentially. And yeah, you just go on this really cool spirit quest with, you know, pretty, you know, satisfying combat. Again, they do a lot with very little, and that, you know, you're in the forest or you're in this other kind of area, and, you know, they create these, I would say, I don't know, skeletons or, you know, ritual sites and statues out of twigs and you know sticks and animal furs and all the things that you just find in the environment, and it has kind of like a very kind of tribalistic feel. It's what I really like about the game. It feels very tribal and also very spiritual because of how Senua is viewing the world. But yeah, it has a really good vibe to it, a really great flow to the combat, really great setting, story, very unique, very interesting. I really, really like this game. And I think probably the peak or my favorite part of this game is actually the ending, because in the ending sequence, you have a licensed song, which is, I think, Birth by Sleep. No, that's a Kingdom Hearts game. Or Just Like Sleep, something by Sleep, or Just Like Sleep by Paracella Death Squad, and it is really, really, really good, really, really cool, like a really cool vibe. I really, really dig it. And so basically, you go up against Hells, who is the, or Hela rather, who is the essentially queen of the underworld in Norse mythology, if I am correct. And there's a lot of really cool sections too, where Senua, she gets lost in this giant sort of darkness, and she finds this blade of light. Another item that she finds is a mirror that allows her to go into this slow-mo Norse mode, and so all these Nordic runes kind of appear on screen, and they all kind of activate this kind of, again, this slow-mo mode that looks really, really cool. In combination with that and the final boss, this game is really good. So I've talked about this a little bit in the past, how I think AA is the right way to go to make a really quality game. You know, you want to have, like, some of the best games, you know, in the 90s and 2000s were games where you know, they were technically AAA, but the budgets were much smaller, the teams were much smaller. You know, it was around 50 people max, and it wasn't these, you know, 100 or 1,000 person teams with like multiple visionary directors where people didn't know where the game was going. And I find with these small teams, people can just like bounce ideas off each other organically like lightning and really make something actually worthwhile. And I think Hellblade is a symbol of that kind of idea. It's also very interesting how Senua herself has gone through a bit of a design change. When this trailer originally came out, it was I don't know, I don't know when it was, but it was like the early 2010s, like maybe 2012 or 2014 or something. And I just remember the Senua's look and the whole design of the whole game as well was very different. I think the blade she was wielding herself was actually a bigger part of the whole game. And at that point, of course, it was just called Hellblade. And so I thought the idea that was coming about was that the blade itself was almost alive, like a soul edge kind of thing, and she was using that power to essentially, fight, these kind of demons, but also was infecting her at the same time. And I still love that trailer for the original Hellblade. It was really cool. Also, it was interesting how they didn't have Marika's face yet. So Senua in that original trailer also looks different than how she does in this game. And so they try to make her look more kind of, I guess, not as heroistic, but more like realistic. Like, oh, there's a certain line where you cross where like, oh, this could be a real person, or this could be like a real archetype or real hero or something like that. And so they went with the more kind of, oh, this is a woman, this isn't like a hero, this is actually just, this could be anyone, is kind of the vibe they were kind of going for, I think. And again, in the developer documentaries, I was just surprised at how much research they did into people with actual mental illnesses, how they didn't want to make just kind of a stereotype of a game or of a character or of a person, and kind of create this experience that is half kind of educational, half art. And so that's kind of a nifty combination of different ideas. But of course, it was something completely off the wall and totally insane. I would also be down for it, but yeah. But Senua, she goes through, this odyssey, this struggle. She's very much, trying to put together the pieces of the puzzle. There's a lot of really cool visual effects and interesting effects and designs in this game, again, that are really, really psychological, really, really kind of mind-bending. And I really, really enjoy and love that. But yeah, what can I say? This is a really good game. I would, highly recommend it. It's very cool. It has really good combat, and it's a unique take on sort of this, medieval classic or ancient kind of setting, where they just added one element where it's more of a spirit journey, and you have the warrior aspect and the spirit aspect and psychological aspect that come together to make a really cool experience. And again, I really think this is a great game. I think it's maybe a little bit too long. One thing I did experience while playing it that really frustrated me is that so when you find these little sort of totems or whatever, you get the lore dumps by this one guy and his voice, and there's some pretty funny things about just general Scandinavian and sort of Viking lore that are really funny sometimes. And of course there's an achievement to find all of them, and the one I was just missing was it was right before the swamp sort of area, or right before the boss in the swamp area. And it's this really hard to get thing, in the sense that if you go down this straight path and you don't check like on the right side, a cutscene will play and you'll be completely locked out. But if you basically sneak around and to go on that right hand path, you'll find that final little totem thing. And for me, that was really frustrating, because I basically found all of them except for that one. So I had to play the whole game again just for that one, but I really didn't mind, because I did think it was a lot of fun and very cool. Another thing I should also mention about this game, that they kind of lied to you about it, and I guess I might as well tell you, or it's not really a spoiler, because it's kind of like a spoiler you should know, which is essentially that they have this thing where every time you die, Senua's arm is kind of rotting, and so every time you basically every time you fall in battle, apparently the rot is supposed to progress and consume you. And eventually, if it gets too far into Senua, the game will actually restart from the very beginning. So it'll be a real game over. And I thought that was a really cool idea, but apparently it doesn't actually work like that. It just says that it does, but it just doesn't actually do that. So like, no matter if you get killed a lot, you'll never actually fully game restart, which is good. There are also different kind of elemental bosses in this game. There's kind of like a crow kind of boss who kind of is a shapeshifter, and his whole gimmick is that he can disappear in the environment to come at any angle. Then you have Surt, who is kind of like a fire kind of deity, and he will essentially use fire attacks, obviously. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds of environments and enemy types, and Senua herself is a pretty interesting character as well. But yeah, I don't have much to say else about this game. It's really good. I really enjoy it. And I think for the scope of this game, I would be really interested to see what the studio makes next. Anyway, guys, with all that being said, I'll see you later. Bye.